At 9:45 a.m. on August 8, 2022, the emergency 000 line of Australian police rang. On the other end was the panicked voice of a man, but what confused the dispatcher was that he was communicating entirely in Cantonese, barely able to speak a complete sentence in English. Amid his rapid breathing and the unfamiliar language, the dispatcher could only gather that this was an urgent distress call, but the specific details remained completely unclear. They had to quickly contact an interpreter service for assistance. As each word was translated, the picture of what had happened gradually emerged, and when everyone realized the severity of the situation, they couldn't help but shudder. Immediately, a police team was urgently dispatched to the address provided, a detached house on Coolidge Court in the peaceful Stretton neighborhood in South Brisbane. When the police cars stopped in front of the gate, a man was sitting near the entrance outside the house. This was the person who had made the distress call earlier. His entire body was covered with dried and fresh bloodstains, and his arms and legs bore deep cuts, clearly caused by a sharp object. Although his injuries looked extremely serious and frightening, the man was still conscious, his eyes tired but still aware of his surroundings. Paramedics quickly began administering first aid, while the police officers, with their professional instincts telling them that something terrible was hidden inside that house, steeled themselves and entered to examine the scene. As the officers began climbing the stairs leading to the second floor, a gruesome scene gradually revealed itself before their eyes. Dark red bloodstains were splattered all over the steps, flowing in streams from above, as if someone had dragged something blood-soaked through there. These traces weren't merely scattered drops of blood, but a thick flow, indicating that an extremely violent and brutal act had occurred inside this seemingly peaceful home. Entering the second floor, the worst fears of the police were confirmed. In two separate bedrooms, they discovered the bodies of a woman and a young man, both lying motionless amid pools of blood that had congealed into a dark brown color. Their bodies bore numerous stab wounds, showing they had suffered a barrage of consecutive attacks. The injuries were so severe that even without a thorough examination, it was clear that neither had any chance of survival. The entire crime scene was covered in blood splattered on walls, soaked into the floor, and spread across the bedsheets. Every trace pointed to a frenzied attack, highly aggressive and at close range. One important detail caught the investigators' particular attention. Both victims were found wearing pajamas, their sleepwear still intact as if they had just fallen asleep or were preparing for bed. This led police to preliminarily conclude that the attack most likely occurred late at night or in the early morning hours, and the victims had likely been attacked while completely off guard. After verifying their identities, police officially announced information about the two unfortunate victims. The woman was Liu Jifeng, 47 years old, and the young man who had just turned 20 was Du Wenhao. They were mother and son. The man found severely injured outside the house, who had made the emergency distress call but had fortunately survived, was identified as Huang Weifeng, 49 years old. After a brief but systematic preliminary investigation, the clues at the scene began to reveal a suspicious picture. Every trace, every piece of evidence seemed to point to the same person, and police quickly turned their suspicion toward Huang Weifeng himself, the person who had initially called to report the incident. Without delay, police immediately restrained him and placed him under arrest at the scene. However, because his injuries were too serious and required urgent medical care, Huang Weifeng was escorted to a nearby hospital for treatment under strict police supervision. Only when his condition stabilized was he formally detained. Upon receiving information about the case, police immediately sealed off the entire area and conducted a meticulous search of the crime scene, combing through every corner of the house. During the search, investigators discovered two suspicious knives that could have been the murder weapons, a long-handled kitchen knife and a meat cleaver, both covered in blood. The sight made everyone present shudder at the brutality and horror of the incident. At the same time, police continuously extracted data from surveillance cameras in the area surrounding the crime scene, and fortunately, they obtained an extremely important video. The footage showed that around 4:22 a.m., Weifeng hurriedly drove a silver car away from the scene, seemingly trying to escape from the place filled with evidence of the crime. About 30 minutes later, around 4:53 a.m., he returned to the scene. This unusual appearance within such a short time made police suspicious of Weifeng's motives. Collecting additional evidence, police discovered that during that time period, Weifeng had tried to clean the bloodstains from his body and changed into different clothes, probably to conceal traces of the crime he had just committed. However, due to his haste and the serious injuries he had sustained, his concealment efforts were not entirely successful, leaving traces that police easily detected. Combining all the collected factors, from the distribution of bloodstains at the scene, physical evidence in the surrounding environment, to the detailed timeline recorded by surveillance cameras, investigators were able to reconstruct the complete picture of what happened that fateful night. According to police analysis, Liu Jifeng and Du Wenhao were most likely attacked between midnight and 4:20 a.m. The deep and serious knife wounds on Huang Weifeng's arms and legs were notable. According to police assessment, these injuries were not the result of him being attacked by a third party, but most likely caused by the two victims fighting back fiercely and desperately during the assault. This showed that despite being ambushed in the middle of the night, both Liu Jifeng and Du Wenhao did not accept their fate, but fought to the end to protect their lives, leaving wounds on the perpetrator's body as evidence of their desperate resistance. Police also reconstructed the events after the crime. After committing the murders, Huang Weifeng did not stay at the scene, but temporarily drove away from the house. During his absence, he tried to clean the bloodstains on his body and change his clothes, probably hoping to erase all traces related to the crime he had just committed. Afterward, he returned to the scene and waited. It wasn't until after 9 a.m. that morning, many hours after the incident occurred, that Weifeng picked up the phone to call police. The investigation into the relationships between the people involved in the case also revealed much important information. As it turned out, Huang Weifeng and victim Liu Jifeng were not strangers, but were in a romantic relationship. They were a couple living together. About a year earlier, Weifeng had moved in with Jifeng and her son Du Wenhao at the very house where the tragedy occurred. What made the case even more puzzling and mysterious was the outwardly peaceful appearance of this family. When investigators checked local police records, they found no warning signs beforehand. There had never been a single report related to domestic violence, no neighbors had complained about loud arguments, and there were no records of any serious conflicts or disputes in this house. To search for more important evidence and identify witnesses who could help clarify the case, police decided to expand the investigation scope, not just within the crime scene, but also exploring the surrounding neighborhoods. They approached neighbors one by one to gather information about what had happened that night. A man living near the victim's home said the family was very private and rarely interacted with neighbors. They lived a quiet life without attracting attention. When meeting on the street, they would just exchange brief greetings without any lengthy conversations. This made the neighbor feel nothing special had occurred in the area, as the family had long maintained a very secluded lifestyle. Another neighbor shared that on the night of the incident, he didn't see any strangers appear in the area, nor did he hear any arguments or cries for help from inside the house. However, he recalled that on the night before the incident, a dog on the street had been barking continuously for a long time. He found this quite unusual, as the street was normally very quiet, rarely having such noise. Although he felt something was off, he didn't think it was a sign of anything serious. It wasn't until the next morning, when police arrived to seal off the scene, that he was shocked to realize that the previous night, right on this peaceful street, a horrific murder had taken place that no one could have anticipated. The expanded investigation also shed light on the financial situation and living circumstances of the victim's family. According to property records, the legal owner of the house where the crime occurred was victim Liu Jifeng herself. This was no ordinary house, but an elegant two-story detached home with full luxury amenities, a spacious backyard with a refreshing swimming pool, grounds large enough to comfortably park 4 cars, and a total land area of approximately 7,300 square feet. Based on the real estate market valuation at that time, the house was estimated to be worth around $1.1 million, no small figure. It should be noted that Stretton has long been known as one of the most upscale and affluent residential areas in South Brisbane, home to families with solid financial standing. Liu Jifeng's ownership of such a property in this area somewhat reflected that she was a woman with impressive financial capability and a fairly high income level. On the afternoon of the day the crime occurred, a man with a dazed face and reddened eyes appeared at the scene. This was Du Peiwu, Liu Jifeng's ex-husband. He had rushed there immediately after receiving the terrible news from friends that his ex-wife and biological son had both been brutally murdered. When he arrived around 3 p.m. and witnessed the heavy atmosphere surrounding the house that had once been his family's home, Du Peiwu nearly collapsed emotionally. His legs seemed to buckle, and in his extreme anguish, he could only cry out that no matter what, he could not believe and could not accept this cruel reality. In his anguished words to police and the media, Du Peiwu recounted the story of his marriage and his family's journey to build their life. He said that both he and Jifeng were originally from Taiwan, and they had married in 1999 in a wedding full of happiness and hope. 3 years later, in 2002, their joy doubled when they welcomed their first and only son, Du Wenhao. In 2008, with the aspiration to bring a brighter future to his wife and child, Du Peiwu made a courageous but difficult decision: to leave his family alone and fly all the way to Australia to seek work opportunities. The days away from home were a period full of hardship and loneliness. He worked tirelessly from early morning until late at night, saving every dollar he earned, living as frugally as possible with the hope that one day he could reunite with his family on this new land. After 2 grueling years of sweat and tears, he finally accumulated enough money to sponsor his wife and son to come to Australia for their reunion. Since the whole family officially settled in Australia, their life gradually stabilized and increasingly flourished. Thanks to hard work and careful planning, they not only had increasingly higher income, but also gradually accumulated considerable assets. The fruit of those years of struggle was the family owning 2 detached houses and 1 apartment. However, life isn't always as rosy as one might hope. Ironically, as the family's financial conditions improved and became more comfortable, the relationship between the couple did not develop in a similarly positive direction. Instead of becoming closer after years of overcoming difficulties together, Du Peiwu and Jifeng began to develop many conflicts. Arguments became increasingly frequent, sometimes over trivial everyday matters, sometimes due to different perspectives and ways of looking at problems. Gradually, the once passionate marital love began to show irreparable cracks. Finally, after many unsuccessful attempts to save the marriage, the two officially divorced 5 years ago, closing a marriage that had lasted nearly 2 decades. According to the mutually agreed divorce settlement, the luxurious detached house in Stretton, which would later become the site of the tragedy, was left for Jifeng and son Wenhao to continue living in. Du Peiwu moved to another property owned by the family to live alone. Throughout the 5 years since the divorce, he and Jifeng had hardly been in contact anymore, each pursuing their own separate lives. However, although the spousal love was gone, Du Peiwu always maintained his responsibility and love as a father. He still regularly visited his son, and the relationship between father and son remained close and affectionate. Du Peiwu also recounted that after Jifeng entered a new romantic relationship with Huang Weifeng, he had the opportunity to meet this man once. That meeting also included the presence of son Wenhao. During that brief encounter, Du Peiwu noticed that Weifeng could only communicate in Cantonese, while his English or Mandarin was very labored and difficult. This created a significant language barrier in communication, as Wenhao had been accustomed to using Mandarin as his primary language since childhood. To exchange even a few basic words with his mother's boyfriend, the young man had to deliberately speak very slowly, enunciating each word, and even then the conversation proceeded awkwardly and with great difficulty. When mentioning his son, Du Peiwu could not hold back his emotions. His voice began to choke up, his eyes welling with tears as he recalled his beloved son. He said that Wenhao was attending a local technical college and simultaneously working as an apprentice electrician at a company in the area. The young man truly loved the work he was doing, going to work each day with enthusiasm and passion. Wenhao was a hard-working, practical person with responsibility for his work. Everyone was fond of this gentle young man who was always ready to learn and never shied away from difficulties. Dupewu said his son strived every day, both studying and accumulating practical experience. Wenhao had just turned 20, with his whole life still wide open before him with so many dreams and aspirations yet to be fulfilled. Thinking of this, the grieving father's voice seemed to falter. He said that no matter how much he thought about it, he simply could not understand, could not comprehend why Huang Weifeng could have acted so cruelly toward his ex-wife and only son. The day after the horrific crime occurred, the wheels of justice began to turn. Due to the serious wounds on his body requiring surgery and continued hospitalization, Huang Weifeng could not appear in court in person in the usual manner. Instead, he appeared at his first hearing via video link, connecting from his hospital bed at Brisbane Hospital under strict guard and supervision by police. In this hearing, Huang Weifeng was formally charged by prosecutors with 2 counts of murder, corresponding to the deaths of Liu Zhifeng and Du Wenhao. Facing these serious charges, he did not request bail or offer any defense, choosing instead to remain completely silent, his face showing no emotion. Throughout the subsequent investigations and legal proceedings, to ensure the defendant's rights and facilitate smooth communication, police specially arranged for an interpreter fluent in Cantonese to assist during interrogations. However, despite all efforts by authorities to accommodate him, Huang Weifeng firmly refused to cooperate. He maintained a silent attitude and repeatedly demanded that a lawyer be present before he would answer any questions. As the investigation into the case deepened, Huang Weifeng's past was gradually revealed. According to what was discovered, Weifeng worked as a chef and previously lived in the Sunshine Coast area. He had been married once and had a daughter with his ex-wife. However, after the marriage fell apart and they officially divorced, he decided to leave Sunshine Coast to settle in Brisbane and start a new life. From then on, Weifeng completely cut off contact with his ex-wife and biological daughter. Regarding the financial situation and business of the couple Weifeng and Zhifeng, evidence showed that in January of the same year the crime occurred, the two had pooled their resources to buy a small Thai restaurant located on Caxton Street, right in the bustling center of Brisbane, for $10,000. At first glance, this transfer price seemed quite low and like a bargain for a food establishment in such a prime location. However, according to accounts from nearby residents and neighboring shop owners, the actual business of this restaurant was far from promising. Many revealed that the restaurant was frequently deserted, with only scattered customers coming to eat, some days with hardly a single person stopping by. The prolonged slump led Weifeng and Zhifeng to decide to abandon daytime business operations, only running it minimally. By a few weeks before the tragedy occurred, the restaurant was frequently closed. According to gathered sources, it was precisely because of the increasingly heavy financial pressure that both Weifeng and Zhifeng were urgently trying to transfer the restaurant to someone else to escape this burden. To better understand the background of the Thai restaurant that Weifeng and Zhifeng had taken over, police contacted and took testimony from the previous owner of the establishment. Daniel, the former owner, recounted the entire story. In October of the previous year, he and his Thai wife named Ma Yu Li had decided to invest in the food industry by purchasing this shop for $27,000. After completing the transfer procedures, they invested a significant additional sum to renovate and refresh the restaurant space to make it more attractive before officially opening for business. However, the business reality was completely opposite to what they had expected. After a few months of operation, business at the restaurant was extremely slow, with customers so sparse it was alarming. Almost every month the restaurant was in a state of loss, with income insufficient to cover operating costs like rent, ingredients, labor, and other expenses. Daniel's financial situation became increasingly dire. He fell into a situation where expenses exceeded income and debts piled up. Finally, with no other choice, Daniel had to accept defeat and post advertisements seeking someone to take over the restaurant to cut his losses. But even finding a buyer was not easy in such a gloomy business environment. It wasn't until January of that year, after many months of unsuccessful attempts to sell, that Daniel was forced to lower the price significantly below what he had invested. Through a friend's introduction, he finally sold the restaurant to Huang Weifeng for only $10,000. During the handover period, Ma Yu Li, Daniel's Thai wife, dedicatedly spent about 2 weeks personally training Huang Weifeng. Only when she felt Weifeng could handle the kitchen work on his own did she officially hand over the restaurant keys to the new owner. Throughout those 2 weeks of training and interaction, Ma Yuli had the opportunity to observe and learn more about Huang Weifeng as a person. According to what she described to police, Weifeng had a rather introverted and quiet personality. Due to his limited language ability, he had difficulty expressing himself and communicating, and sometimes what he said was not easy for listeners to understand. However, despite that language barrier, during their time working together, Weifeng seemed to gradually feel more comfortable and began to open up to Ma Yuli. He shared about his past family life, saying that because the nature of chef work required many consecutive hours of work, he was frequently away from home with no time for family. The prolonged distance gradually created a gap between husband and wife, ultimately leading to the marriage falling apart. After the divorce, Weifeng admitted that he had completely cut off contact with his ex-wife and biological daughter, with no connection whatsoever anymore. Once, she intended to take a portrait photo of him to post on the restaurant's official Facebook page to promote and introduce the new owner to customers. However, Weifeng immediately and firmly refused this request. He emphasized that he did not want anyone to see or know of his existence through social media. This behavior struck Ma Yuli as quite strange. Ma Yuli also mentioned that one time Weifeng came to training with his arm wrapped in bandages, but he said he had been burned while working at another restaurant. Throughout the 2 weeks of working together, Weifeng had hardly ever revealed anything about his current romantic life. He never mentioned having a girlfriend, and the name Liu Jifeng had never once come up in their conversations. Therefore, it wasn't until the final day when the restaurant handover was officially completed that Ma Yuli had the chance to see Liu Jifeng appear. That day, Jifeng brought her son to the restaurant to pay for the purchase together. Only then did Ma Yuli realize that Weifeng actually had a girlfriend. On the day the transaction was completed, Weifeng and Jifeng shared the payment between them, each contributing $5,000. After the $10,000 was paid in full, complete ownership of the Thai restaurant was officially transferred to the new couple. Ma Yuli handed over the keys, completed all necessary paperwork, and from that moment on, she never saw Huang Weifeng or Liu Jifeng again. Although Huang Weifeng later committed such a brutal and unforgivable crime against his girlfriend and her son, paradoxically, customers who had visited his Thai restaurant had quite a few positive reviews of him as a person. When interviewed, some regular customers commented that Weifeng was an extremely hard-working and diligent owner, with the restaurant practically run and operated single-handedly by him. Others expressed appreciation for his cooking skills, saying the Thai dishes Weifeng prepared had very delicious and rich flavors, making the restaurant a favorite spot they frequently visited. Although Weifeng's English was not fluent, and communication sometimes faced many obstacles, he always showed his best effort to listen and understand customer needs. In their eyes, Weifeng was a serious owner, responsible for his work, and always putting customer satisfaction first. These positive images were completely contrary to the savage actions he had committed, leaving many people shocked and hardly able to believe it was the same person. News of the tragic deaths of Liu Jifeng and Du Wenhao quickly spread and caused a powerful shock throughout the Brisbane community. The fact that a mother and son were brutally murdered in their own home in a neighborhood considered peaceful and safe left many people stunned and worried. Moving into 2023, the trial process encountered some procedural obstacles. Because Huang Weifeng's defense team needed time to translate video interview evidence recorded in Cantonese into English to ensure validity when presented before the court, the preliminary hearing was therefore delayed. On November 14, 2023, Huang Weifeng officially appeared at Brisbane Magistrates Court to attend the preliminary hearing. In this hearing, an important witness was summoned to give testimony, a close friend of victim Du Wenhao. According to this friend's account, Wenhao had complained multiple times that Huang Weifeng, when he first moved in, had contributed rent in full, showing responsibility as a family member. However, after some time, he gradually stopped paying, no longer participating in any living expenses whatsoever. Not only that, Wei Feng also completely failed to participate in household chores, with all the burden falling on Jifeng and her son. In Wen Hao's eyes, Wei Feng was a lazy, useless person who only knew how to live off others. More seriously, this friend also revealed that Wei Feng frequently argued with Wen Hao's mother, Liu Jifeng, right in their own home. These arguments seemed to occur regularly, showing that the relationship between this couple was not as harmonious as it appeared on the surface. After listening to and examining all the evidence presented, the court ruled that the case had sufficient grounds to proceed to formal trial. The legal proceedings from here officially entered the trial phase, and the case would be transferred to the Supreme Court of Queensland to be tried according to proper legal process. Up to the present time, Huang Weifeng has maintained a silent attitude and has never publicly revealed the true motive behind his brutal criminal act. However, based on witness testimony and evidence collected during the investigation, police have made some inferences about the possible causes leading to the tragedy. According to the investigators' assessment, Weifeng's criminal behavior most likely stemmed from long-standing conflicts and financial disputes within the family, combined with heavy pressure from the restaurant business continuously losing money with no signs of improvement. Weifeng probably had to endure increasingly accumulated feelings of failure, helplessness, and despair as he watched the business head toward a dead end, while he himself could not contribute anything financially to the family. These negative emotions accumulated over time and finally exploded into a violent argument with Liu Jifeng on that fateful night, leading to a tragic outcome no one could have anticipated. This tragic case has left many valuable lessons and caused people to reflect deeply on the hidden corners of modern family life. Behind the doors of homes that seem peaceful and happy, sometimes lie smoldering conflicts, accumulating pressures and cracks that no one can see from the outside. Life is not always as it appears on the surface, and tragedy can strike at any moment without warning. Financial disputes that seem trivial, feelings of failure and helplessness before unsuccessful business ventures, combined with emotional conflicts accumulated over time, all merged into a time bomb just waiting to explode. When pressure exceeds the threshold of endurance without an outlet or timely support, people can resort to the most extreme and brutal actions. And that is today's case. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next videos.